So what I'm gonna do today is actually install a front mount intercooler. I feel like every time I go online or look at like a YouTube video of like a GS or an Aristo, like nobody has a like front mount install or modification video or whatnot. So I felt like it was kind of a necessity to put one together, especially for those that are interested in putting one on. Now the kit I have today, this is a replica kit of the GReddy 24F kit. In comparison, I'll show you some pictures, but it looks pretty spot on. I have my connections to get this kit overseas, and it kind of made sense financially at the moment. So I'll kind of use the GReddy pictures as a reference to install this kit. So the first thing we're gonna do to pull this bumper off is actually we're gonna remove, should be 10 bolts on the bottom half of this bumper down here. You should be able to see them. They kind of like this, and they go all around this bottom portion of the bumper. So you have to remove, should be a total of 10 of them. So I went ahead and finished taking all 10 bolts out. It's good to have something like this just to hold them in place. You don't want to lose these, especially if you lose them and you run over them. That's gonna be a flat repair. So make sure you have everything to put them in, whether it's a Ziploc bag or some kind of magnetic tray like this to hold everything in. Now, the next step you're gonna probably want to do is either remove the wiring harness connected to the fog light bulb, or remove the bulb connected to the fog light bulb. I don't recommend removing the bulb because there's a chance you might break it or put oils on the bulb, causing it to break. Or what I'll probably end up doing is just taking the 10mm bolts here, removing the whole fog light assembly, and then taking the harness off from there. Whatever is more convenient for you, you can do that way. All right, so now that I got the fog light bulbs out, or the fog light housings, you can see that over there. You can just go ahead and unclip it. There are gonna be a couple of other bolts that's gonna hold this liner off, and you need to take this part down just because there's gonna be a bolt that we need to get to. So there should be a bolt, like probably one or two holding the liner upward into the body, and then one kind of right here by this tow hook where I'm at. You should be able to see them. It should be the only thing that kind of holds this whole thing from shifting back and forth, and I'll tell you why that's important here in a second. Now, the reason why that's important is because there's a bolt like pretty much right here that you're gonna have to get to, and you'll have to probably take out that one also. So you're gonna get a wobble in there, or you can take the kind of the wheel and just turn it to one direction to get to it. One thing I forgot to mention too, you can also use a Phillips head screwdriver, because the bolts do have Phillips heads on the end of it. So that's the bolt that you're kind of looking to get to, so you can remove that aspect of the bumper off. As you can see, once you remove that, you'll start noticing that there's a lot of play, but there's still bolts you have to take off. So I wouldn't recommend pulling really hard yet. The next thing we're gonna do after we've taken both sides off for all the bolts, we're gonna remove this tab on the GS300. It's probably a bolt. Here it looks like just a plastic tab that you're gonna spin off. And you're gonna remove that bolt. You're gonna remove this bolt and then this tab. All right, so once you take everything else I told you to take off, the last one's actually I'm gonna take off. If you look through here, it's gonna be probably hard to see. Down in, yeah, maybe you can't see it. Anyways, there is a 10mm bolt. Essentially it's gonna hold this component to the fender. Do not pull the bumper until you get this 10mm bolt out. It's gonna be in there, zinc coated. I wish I could show you guys, but unfortunately there's not enough lighting, but it is back there. So you're gonna have to fish with it with a deep socket because there's a stud coming out of it, and I'll show you what the bolt looks like once we're done. These are what those 10mm look like. It's just a washer with the 10mm on top that are holding the bumper in place. All right, so now that everything is good, you should be able to pull the bumper off. Remember, I want to remind you, there are 4, 1, 2, and then 3, 4. Originally I made the mistake of only thinking there was one on each side. There's actually 2, so I have a slight tear in plastic in the bumper, but that's gonna be easy fix. So just give you the heads up. And as I said before, I don't really know in what direction I'm gonna go for the install because there's no instructions. Even on the GReddy's website, for the Aristo chassis, I didn't see instructions. I just see the Mark IV Supra. but it looks kind of straightforward for the most part. And I've read online on some forums what to do, so I have a general idea. The assumption would be that I'm probably gonna have to remove this core support. Oh, I'm sorry, the bumper itself, the metal bumper. I would like to still use it, but I gotta see how much I can use, if I can use any of it at all. And I'm probably gonna remove the intake temporarily until I can get the intercooler piping off, the original one. And then the side mount should be down here, which I'm obviously gonna remove to put the front mount on there. All right, so what we're gonna have to do now is remove the intake box. Now, either this is a good time for you to upgrade to a different intake if you like, HKS, CX Racing, Apexy, whatever it is. For this install, I'm actually gonna use a stock intake box. I haven't seen anything saying that the aftermarket intakes make more power per se on this setup. So most likely the stock intake box is what I'll be using long term until I go single. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove one bolt there, 1 10mm bolt there, one right there, loosen either that clamp or the clamp up there, disconnect the map sensor, make sure you don't break this, because obviously with age these things get brittle, so you don't want to break that, so you don't have to rewire it. Tuck it back there, and then you should be able to kind of pull up and it should come right out. Okay, so air box is out. Like I said, please be careful with this coupler up there. It's, especially a car being 25 plus years old, these things are pretty brittle, so you can use a penetrating fluid just to soften everything up before you pull. Luckily for me, mine came up pretty easy without using anything like that. And this is going to expose the pipe going to the turbochargers down here, and it'll go down to the small front mount. And then this pipe, there should be a pipe that goes all the way up somewhere to this region back into the intake system. So we'll start tearing everything apart little by little, and then I'll show you how to install the new piece. All right, so I removed this pipe that goes to the front mount. You can see the outing right there. And you can see, where did I put that? Oh, right there. And now I'm gonna do is I remove these 2 plastic pieces. They kind of go in the front. They just pop right off with like a pry bar or something, some small screwdriver. And you're gonna have bolts that go in these holes. There should be 3 on this side and 3 on this side, and that's gonna remove your metal bumper off the actual vehicle itself. Now that I've removed the metal bumper with these 6 bolts, and they're gonna be like this, and then these tabs are gonna hold the metal bumper. Just keep in mind there is a temp sensor for exterior use. There's a harness you have to disconnect. You can just unplug that, let that hang there. And then you are also going to have to unscrew the shroud that goes to the front mount. So it should be 4 10mm bolts. And then that should release the shroud and allow it to come out so you can get access to it. So once you remove the shroud, there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts that are 10mm, and then you're gonna have this bracket that actually bolted up to the chassis and kind of grab the support of the actual front mount. You're gonna remove that, and then there's actually 1 more bolt back here that holding on to the actual chassis. That should loosen everything up. There might be 1 more floating around here, but it kind of just feels like the rest of the intercooler piping is just grabbing it. So I'm gonna start removing everything here and seeing what else is grabbing it. All right, so I had the front mount off. What I actually had to do was take 3 bolts off that held the headlight in place, because the intercooler, the way it's shaped, kind of makes contact with that part of the headlight. It's not hard to do. Like I said, it's just 3 10mm. You take all of these off, like I said prior. Behind it, you kind of have to be a little tricky with it. There's a hidden one back there I couldn't see, so you have to feel for that one. That one already took off. And then once you do this and take that one off, take the rest of those off to get to the other side. There's a couple of 10mm there. Everything should come off. So my next attempt is going to be able to put the front mount on. As I said before, this is a GReddy Trust copy. I don't know about fitment, if it's going to fit correctly. Based off pictures, they look similar. But as far as sizing goes, I don't know, because I don't have the original component. But from a measuring standpoint, this is going to be 3 inches, the actual core itself. And then I believe it's going to be like 2.5 for the inlets and outlets. Okay, so the next part, you actually have to take this, it's kind of like a power steering cooler. I believe it's a power steering cooler. The fluid I pull out there is pretty nasty, so it's a good thing because I gotta either replace it. This is probably the original power steering fluid from 1997. So you're gonna have to remove that. I'm still trying to figure that out, but what I did figure out is that I know that part of the intercooler is going to have to reuse this bolt, which held the original horn. So this one's actually pretty easy to do. All you gotta do is relocate the horn all the way over here to where you have your existing horn. You can reuse the bolt hole, and it actually bolts up pretty nice there, doesn't move. And then there is a tab, like a hole here. You can reuse a tab to hold it in place and put it right there. And everything works pretty good. It's a pretty OEM-esque fit, so I like it. Okay, so this is day 2. I had to pick some stuff up from the store, and then I had to do some stuff with the family. So kind of gonna start off where I left off regarding the cooler. So I already did remove the lines. It's gonna be hard lines and kind of traveling back here. One part of the hard line is just connected with the hose, and the other part of the hard line is gonna be connected hard line pretty much all the way up into the power steering reservoir. So what you're gonna have to do, or what I did, is I actually made, let's see if I can show you guys. And I'm gonna change that clamp right there. I get a barb fitting to go into that hose, and then on the other line, and you can't see it really good, but I just put a clamp on there. You're gonna take high pressure fuel line, and you're going to go ahead and mount it here. And pretty much all it's gonna do is kind of cool down through this aluminum pipe and then go back in there. So you're just relocating it. And then this hose is gonna sit right behind the intercooler when I mount that. What I also have to do is, there should be like some kind of support bracket that prevents this from kind of wobbling back and forth. You're gonna have to kind of rip that off in order to get the intercooler on there. That way it sits kind of flush. It's somewhere right here. Kind of like goes from like here to here. You're gonna take the bracket. I put it here. Some people like to put it there, but I think over here is a little bit better, so I don't have to run a whole bunch of holes all the way across to this side. I actually want to put my transcooler right there in the future. So what I did, I took a bracket that originally came with this, I bent it to where it bolted up to this, and then this is going to be right behind the intercooler, so you can't even really see it that much. The next part of the install that I did was for the intercooler reservoir mount, and this is going to hold your coolant. This is what the bracket's going to look like. The small bracket is going to go like that. With bolts, and then the large bracket is going to look like that. That way it kind of sits pretty square, relatively square to the actual install itself. So at the moment, I have it mounted up with one bolt. We have to do the bottom parts to level this out a little bit better. So as you can see, there's your cooler line, kind of free floats there. Here's your reservoir that mounted there, and this should go in there. And then your AC lines are actually not making contact at all, which is good. All right, so I went ahead and mounted everything up already. So here is where I mounted the power steering cooler. As I said before, I utilized the bracket that went here so I can mount this in place. The reservoir sits pretty well, pretty close, but doesn't make any contact anywhere. The intercooler piping goes up and then through there. Same with this one. The only thing I didn't like is how the coupler were on this kit, so I went ahead and had another coupler that makes more sense for, in my opinion, for this kit. And I modified it to go here, but it's going to take the same path. It's going to go up, it's going to come up this way, and then go into the actual throttle body. Now for the mounting tabs, I did have to run spacers. These are just temporary nylon ones. I'm going to run aluminum ones in the future, or maybe not. Maybe it doesn't even matter. On the bottom tabs, I also didn't like how the bracket was, so I went ahead and bent the bracket on the vise, and I made that make it work a little bit better. I'm assuming you're supposed to use maybe self-tappers. I'm not really sure, but I don't like the idea of self-tappers, so what I did is I drilled a hole. You have to be really careful because obviously the radiator is up top, and I'm going to use this threaded cert. Then I'm going to put up here, and then I'm going to use a tool in which essentially it's going to have a threaded cert into the metal itself. And as you can see, the fitting is in there. That way I can take my bracket and then place it. This kind of shifts back and forth. Kind of place it the way I want to have it, and then I can take my bolt and then thread it in there. And then once I thread this there, and then I've tightened this, I can kind of move this back and forth the radiator until I get it to the specification or the correct gapping that I want. All right, so now that everything is pretty much buttoned up, no leaks in the power steering. I'm just letting it kind of air bleed, going back and forth on the steering wheel. I'll finish that later. Everything seems pretty tight. Nothing is moving at all. The fun part, this is the bumper itself. Obviously, it pretty much sat where the intercooler is now. So what you're gonna have to do is, from my understanding, you're gonna have to cut pretty much the center out and then allow it to bolt up on this side. So I'm gonna take the general measurements, make my cuts, put everything together. All right, so I went ahead and marked it. What I did is I took what I felt was the lowest point of the intercooler, somewhere in this general range. It's roughly about 28.5 inches across. And then I found the center of this, and then I marked the difference on the intercooler there. So center would be 14.25. And then it should be the difference. There should be like 2 holes here, kind of as a reference point. And then that's where I should make the cut. So I pull the center part all out, and then I'll be able to bolt these sections back onto there until I find a better solution so I can have a crash bar, maybe a tubular one I'll weld at the school. The next thing you also want to do is remove, there's like an atmospheric sensor. So it just like reads the temperature on the outside. It's that one right there. I took the clip out as best as I could. Because what I'll end up doing is I'll just drill a hole somewhere here and then put that sensor there. So it's kind of OEM-esque. Modified the bumper support. Cut it. I had to modify some more in the back because making contact with the intercooler. And then I also drilled a hole underneath so I can mount that sensor there. And then I'm probably going to modify some of the foam padding so I can put back on those components. And here it is with some of the padding that I modified. This one broke, unfortunately, a little bit more, but I put some double-sided Gorilla Tape so that it sits on there. I would assume this kind of gives some support to the bumper. I wasn't sure, it might not, but just to be on the safe side, I had some padding here and some padding over there. All right, so the next step I'm gonna take is to kind of trim the bumper, the coupler, where the intercooler exits from, and it goes in, it's making contact. So I'm gonna try to take this material off. I'm using a blue tape so that when I get close to it, it's kind of a reference line, but it's also gonna kind of help the paint not splinter and kind of get chewed up as best as possible. So it's better to take a little bit off at a time, and then go all crazy and then cut off too much, then it kind of looks bad. You also want to be careful with these tabs for your fog lights. You want to make sure that you don't take anything off of here because you don't want to lose integrity, and then your fog lights won't be able to kind of attach itself to this component. All right, so nighttime, finally completed it. Pretty much all I did was go back in the steps that I went at the beginning. So put everything together. Like I said, I did have to do some trimming. Not super content with the trimming, but overall it's not horrible. Just to fit the pipes and the couplers, I just have to trim. And I actually had to pull out one of these like knobs because it was in the way. But other than that, everything went together okay. This kit is so-so, but for the price, it wasn't too bad. I'm assuming the original GReddy kit is probably similar. Maybe it's a little bit easier, but it was a relatively lengthy install. I did take my time to do it the best that I felt I could do it. I do think that aesthetically it looks pleasing. I do like the fact that I still left the factory air box in there. Unless I don't know if there's a gain for aftermarket intakes on this car, stock turbo. But overall it looks pretty good. And as you can see, it's the power steering line. So I'm still in the process of bleeding the system. It seems like it's taking longer than it should. I checked for any kind of leaks or anything. I look pretty good. So that pretty much concludes the install for this. As you can see, there she is right there.